I'm Christina from the US.
Hello, I'm Lauren from the UK.
G'day, I'm Grace from Australia.
Wow.
1.5 million.
Yay!
Oh my
So
God.
exciting. Thank you guys.
Thanks for watching. In the US, we call that a movie theatre. In the UK, we call that the cinema. In Australia, we call that the movies. Me, I say all of them. It's true.
Yeah. I've definitely heard all of them, but I think depending on what country you're from, maybe someone will say it, a little bit
different
more
way.
often.
Where is this person from?
Yeah.
Lino, where are you at?
Where are you from?
UK, the good old original. USA, the alternative universe. That's cool.
Wow.
Australia, the crossover.
The love child.
Yeah,
You are the love child.
UK, the proper oldest child. USA, rebellious middle kid. Australia, youngest that kind of does their own thing.
Oh man, these people, you're creative.
Yeah.
They got it quite accurately though, I think.
Oh, that's funny. Good one, Jack.
UK, we like proper English. US, let's create star emoji different, star emoji English. Australia, whatevs.
Whatevs.
To the UK girl who thought US called McDonald's McDicks, that would be us here in Canada.
Okay, that makes sense now because I have a lot of Canadian friends. So
It
I
was
was like,
the-
I knew I heard it somewhere.
It was the Canadian.
Okay, so in Canada too, they call it McDicks. All right.
I learned so many new ways for talking about McDonald's from the comments as well.
Seriously?
There was another one in Australia that I'd forgotten about. We call it the Golden Arches.
Because it's like this.
Yeah, the
Golden
Golden Arches.
Arches.
Okay, nice.
Sounds fancy.
In the US, we would call this a pot.
In the UK, we would call this a boiling pot.
In Australia, we would call this a billy if you're in the outback, or a pot if you're just in the kitchen. Yeah, boil the billy to make a cup of tea on the campfire.
Boiled Billy? No.
Sorry, Billy. Sorry.
Billy. In the US, we would say vacuum.
In the UK, we would say Hoover.
I just think of like. In Australia, we would just call it a vacuum cleaner.
Hoover.
I mean, I was kind of expecting it, but it's just so funny. Like I can't.
I thought you knew what it was, and then you laughed so much, and I was like, oh no.
I was expecting it, but every time I hear the Hoover, it just makes me giggle.
So in the US, we would call this ground beef.
In the UK, we would call this mincemeat, mince beef.
In Australia, we call it mince.
Yeah, I've heard minced as well, but usually in the US, we would call it ground beef.
Ground beef.
Ground beef. In the US, we would call this gum.
In the UK, we would call this chewing gum or chewy.
Chewy! Like Chewbacca from Star Wars.
Yeah, chewy!
In Australia, we call this chewing gum or gum.
That takes me back to high school. Can you lend us a chewy?
Oh,
We always say,
everyone.
can you lend me a chewy?
But
It's
then
like, are
you
you gonna give it
chewy.
back?
Yeah, that's
Can I borrow a chewy? It's like,
But
you
then,
chew
like,
it for a bit and then give it
give
back.
it back.
Yeah.
There is nothing worse than
Yeah.
pre-chewed chewing gum.
Ooh.
Not that I know.
You have it on the regular?
Not that I know what it's like.
You talk like you came from experience now. So in the US, we would call this a highway, freeway.
In the UK, we would call it a motorway.
In Australia, I've heard all of them. Motorway, highway, freeway. I think depends on where you're from in Australia.
Yeah, same in the US. It depends where you're from.
Oh, so it's not like different category of road, it's just like...
Yeah, so if it has like a lot of lanes and the speeding limit is higher, then usually it would be called a highway or freeway. Motorway, maybe I've heard that, but I don't know if it's so much commonly used in the US.
For us, like a motorway is the 3 or 4 lane highway, but we also have a 2-laned one, which is called a dual carriageway.
Oh.
Because we don't really have a lot of like huge motorways in the UK. Me, motorway.
I was going to say motorway as well.
Because, it's the way for the motors to go.
Yeah, exactly. In the US, we would call these sprinkles.
In the UK, we call them hundreds and thousands.
In Australia, they're different. There's the sort of softer ones, we call those sprinkles. Crunchier candy ones, which we call hundreds and thousands.
Hundreds and thousands.
Yeah.
Because that's
So many
because
of
there's
them.
so many.
Yeah.
There's hundreds and thousands. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
In the US, we would call this a truck or semi-truck.
In the UK, we would call this a lorry.
A lorry.
I've heard that, yeah.
Is it short for something?
No idea.
In Australia, we call it a truck. Everything's a truck, whether it's smaller or bigger. If it has sort of the tray,
Yeah.
then it's a truck.
I think same in the US, like people would just say, oh, truck. But if they want to be specific, maybe they would add like, semi-truck.
Because the picture, I mean, it's a lorry, but I feel like we would maybe say van more than lorry. The lorries are like the really big ones, that carry like
Yes. Containers.
the containers on the
Oh,
back.
right.
Lorry. Did you ever hear like red lorry, yellow lorry?
Yes.
Can you
the
do it?
tongue twister,
No.
red lorry, yellow lorry. Oh my god, it's so hard.
Red lorry, yellow lorry, red lorry, yellow lorry, red lorry, yellow lorry.
How are you good at that? How are you so good at that?
Red.
That's it. In the US, we would call this zucchini.
In the UK, we would call this a courgette.
Oh,
Yeah, I've
that
heard
sounds like
Courgette.
that sounds like a car.
car. Like,
Yeah, that's
Corvette.
I
right.
get some
Courgette.
courgettes in my Corvette.
In Australia, we call this a zucchini.
I've heard zucchini.
Is courgette French?
Yeah, so I guess courgette comes from French and zucchini comes from Italian.
Okay. In the US, we would call this elevator.
In the UK, we would call this a lift.
In Australia, we call it an elevator. But I have heard lift.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard lift before.
Use elevator a lot now.
I bet,
Yeah.
yeah. It's more common, right? Elevator.
Elevate. Elevate.
Yeah,
Rather
they
than
literally
elevate.
mean the
They
same
elevate.
thing. Lift,
Lift
and
also,
elevate.
Yeah. Same thing.
We're raising you up.
Elevator. In the US, we would call this appetizer.
In the UK, we would call this a starter.
In Australia, we would call it an appetizer.
I feel like it depends on which restaurant you go to in the UK. It could say
Yeah.
starter
Yeah.
or appetizer,
Yeah.
but usually we'd be like, or what would you like for starters?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
okay.
true actually. I have heard that a lot in Australia as well.
In the US, we would call this a turtleneck.
In the UK, we would call this a polo neck.
In Australia, we would call this a turtleneck. Yeah, I think it's kind of funny, isn't it?
Turtle.
The thought of a turtle.
Yeah, I don't know.
They have a
like
long
your-
neck.
But is polo is it a common piece of clothing that people wear
Polo?
when they play polo?
What do people wear when they play polo? I couldn't tell you. I'm wondering if it. No, it can't come from Ralph Lauren, can it? That's not old
But
enough.
maybe.
But
Yeah.
maybe.
Maybe it was popular, right?
Maybe I
Anyone
should
who
know.
plays polo.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Yeah.
I mean, polo neck. It doesn't really make sense.
Turtleneck.
Turtleneck kind of makes sense.
Kind of makes
'cause
sense.
turtles have like.
They have their little protection.
In the US, we would call this a plug or outlet.
In the UK, we would call this a plug socket.
In Australia, we would call it a power socket.
Oh, outlet, yeah, is
Like a shopping outlet.
a shopping outlet where they sell branded stuff, but like.
Right.
Discounted
Right.
like last season's clothes on sale.
Yeah, I
Love
feel like I
those
would
places.
say outlet, not outlet. But I think
Outlet.
also the extension cords I would maybe call an outlet.
Yes.
The ones that
Oh, right.
have the extension.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it's out of the.
Let.
What's a let?
What is a let?
What is
is a
English? What is English? So in the US, we would call these pickles.
In the UK, we would call these gherkins.
I've heard that before, and I think like when I used to go to the grocery store, I think the small pickles would be called gherkins. In the US, gherkins. They would be called. Sorry. Gherkins. I don't know what happened to.
Thinking about something really rude right now.
Oh my. Anyways, would you call even the big pickles those two?
Gherkins?
Gherkins. Yeah.
Okay, so
Don't cry.
I think in the UK we call the smaller ones pickles.
So it's the opposite.
Oh.
Okay, girl, you gotta chill.
We'll give her a minute. In Australia, we call these gherkins. But gherkins are specific to the pickled cucumber, right?
Yeah.
Pickled cucumber.
Yeah.
But we have pickles of other things,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
they
yeah.
would just
Pickled
be pickled.
onions or-
Pickled onions.
So today we talked about some vocabulary difference from the US, UK, and Australia. So if you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.